In the summer of 1914, Europe looked peaceful from a distance. People traveled by trains, wrote letters instead of messages, and believed modern technology would only make life better. But under this surface, powerful countries were competing for land, colonies, and influence. Many historians later said Europe was a powder keg, and all it needed was a single spark. That spark came on June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo, when the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated by a young Serbian nationalist. At first, many Europeans thought the crisis would pass quickly, as other political conflicts had done before. But alliances between countries turned a small conflict into a global war. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Russia supported Serbia, Germany supported Austria-Hungary, and soon France and Britain entered the war as well. Within weeks, Europe was fully involved in what we now call the First World War. The life of a soldier. When young soldiers arrived at the front lines, they expected to fight heroic battles and return home as soon as Christmas. But instead, they faced something unimaginable: trench warfare. Soldiers dug long, deep lines in the ground, sometimes hundreds of kilometers long, and lived inside them for months. The trenches were muddy, full of rats, and often flooded with rain. Many soldiers wrote in their diaries that the terrible smell and constant cold were harder to survive than the enemy itself. Between the trenches stretched no man's land, a dangerous open space filled with barbed wire and bombs. Attacking across this field was almost impossible, and many soldiers lost their lives trying. The land barely moved from one side to the other, even though thousands died every day. One historian said it was a war in which men died for meters, new and terrifying weapons. One of the most shocking things about World War I was the use of new technologies. Airplanes were used for the first time. Tanks appeared for the first time. And the most frightening of all was poison gas. Gas could burn the lungs and blind soldiers in seconds. Many soldiers had nightmares about gas attacks for the rest of their lives. Fun fact, German fighter pilot Manfred von Richthofen was called the Red Baron, and he shot down around 80 enemy planes, becoming one of the most famous pilots in history. A moment of humanity. Despite the horrors of war, a beautiful and surprising event happened in December 1914. On Christmas Eve, German and British soldiers stopped fighting, climbed out of their trenches, and met in no man's land. They exchanged small gifts, sang Christmas songs, and even played football together. This moment became known as the Christmas Truce, and it reminded the world that even enemies are still human beings. The end of the war. The war continued for 4 long years. Millions of soldiers died, and many countries were left in ruins. In 1917, the United States entered the war on the side of Britain and France, giving them new strength. Finally, in November 1918, Germany agreed to end the fighting, and at 11 o'clock on November 11th, the guns became silent. The Treaty of Versailles was signed the next year. It punished Germany heavily, forced it to give up territory, and pay huge amounts of money. Many historians say that the anger and economic problems caused by this treaty later helped Adolf Hitler rise to power, leading to World War II only 20 years later. What we learned. World War I changed the world forever. Old empires collapsed, new nations were created, and society understood how destructive modern war could be. One interesting fact is that after the war, the League of Nations was created, the first attempt to form a global organization to keep peace. Although it failed, it prepared the way for the United Nations we have today.